Believe it or not only is the school year coming to a close here at IPFW, but Mastodon Spotlight for 2004-2005 is coming to a close as well. On our final edition of the program, we're going to talk with Athletic Director Mark Pope and get a State of the Athletic Department update. Again, final edition of Mastodon Spotlight is brought to you by our good friends at Ryan Steakhouse, located on North Clinton Street across from Scott's Foods. Please stay tuned. My conversation begins with Mark Pope in a moment, right here on College 56 Sports.
Do you have everything you need? Paper, pencils?
We only ask that you do your best.
And make you a snack.
Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne. One university, two great names.
Hi everybody, I'm Mike Maas. Welcome to the season finale of Mastodon Spotlight for the 2004-2005 school year. Hard to believe we started this back in August of 2004, and here we are at the end of June in 2005. But our special guest, our one and only guest on this final edition of Mastodon Spotlight for this season is the Director of Athletics, Mark Pope. And Mark, it's taken me an awful long time to finally get a hold of you, but you promised to come on board, and I really appreciate you giving us a little bit of time.
Mike, glad to do it. As you know, anytime I can come in and chat with you about where we are with athletics and where we're going, glad to do it.
As I said, August 2004 was such a long time ago, but let's take a look back. And a busy season. It seems like the school year always starts not only academically but athletically with the soccer showcase. And last year, another great turnout by the community to see quality collegiate talent.
You know, it's interesting. I love the showcase being where it is and the timing, because we have a period of time in the summer to kind of catch our breath, relax, but then get focused and organized on what we're doing with the showcase. And we don't really have that for any other sport, because you're moving from one into the next as you roll through 16 sports in 8 months. But with the showcase, you can spend a little time thinking about this and organizing it and getting it ready. So, in fact, as we are taping this, I just left the meeting for the 2005 soccer showcase planning session, and that's well along the way. But anytime you can pull in number one versus number two in terms of a competition, IU versus St. John's, we go right up against opening night for high school football and never miss a beat, because Soccer Nation appears for our event and the football fans go to theirs. It's a great evening in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Well, we start with soccer, but when we look back at all the sports, cross country, Mike Frucci, we just had him on recently, and he has got a couple of gals, and one of them, Ashley Ritchie from Leo, who is phenomenal both in cross country and in track, but his program is improving rapidly. We talk about soccer, and again, we had Terry Stefankowitz on a couple of weeks back. He and Mike Harper and Ian Lulia try to run two different programs, and that's a tough enough challenge, running one, much less two. And when we look back at last year, on the women's side, the women's soccer team seemed to absorb the bulk of the injuries that occurred here on campus. I know at one time Cherry lost 6 starters due to injury, but they still competed, and they got that season-ending victory that he was so proud of. The men's team lost their final game, which cost them a winning season, and the stubbornness in Terry came out, frustration that, hey, we gave it a good go and we just missed out in the last game. And you had Peter Hi-Hi, the senior from Palatine, Illinois, who led the nation in save percentage, and the fall programs are doing well.
Yeah, and I think as you look back in 2004 in the fall, let's not forget what I consider to be the signal event as far as IPFW athletics was concerned at that point. While all of this was going on, we were finishing up our presentation and being met by our peer groups on campus and the NCAA staff to be certified as a Division I program. Under NCAA rules, each university, each Division I university needs to undergo a complete recertification program every 5 years. This was our first effort at it because we were certified Division I in September of 2002, and then you go into this recertification process, which is a much more in-depth and a much more detailed evaluation of your programs. They literally take apart everything you're doing in athletics and then test it against other institutions, test it against other campus institutions. And, in other words, are we working with the faculty appropriately? Are we working with the community appropriately? How is our administration view athletics? And they test that all against the standards that the Division I programs have established. And I'm just so proud to say that through the hard work of Abby Reneker, our compliance officer, and Jack Dahl over in the in Kettler Hall, and of course the Chancellor and Vice Chancellors, we were certified Division I and recertified through that process on the first go-around. Well, that's not always done. There are many major institutions that are certified with exceptions, which means, yeah, you're certified, but you've got to clean up this, or you need to fix this, or this isn't working right. And all of that was done the first time without any exceptions. As a lawyer, I find that a great point of pride that we were able to handle that and get through that administrative process as cleanly as we did. As an athletic director, I'm just so proud of my staff for putting together all of the mountains of paperwork, and I literally have binders this deep that go into everything we do from a gender equity standpoint. Are we treating our two male and female sets of athletes appropriately? Are we expending the right resources for each of them? How are we doing academically? Drug testing, what's our policy, and is it in place, and is it functional, is it working? How do we stand vis-a-vis the academic side of the campus? Because as you know, athletics must always follow academics. This is an academic institution, not an athletic institution. So to have that, given that clean bill of health by the NCAA, to me is absolutely a phenomenal effort by our staff. And secondly, and I know I'll get to sports eventually here, but secondly, the drug policy that the NCAA has is an interesting approach. There is no drug testing policy for the NCAA. You don't have to drug test if you don't want to. But the NCAA, on 12 hours notice, can come on your campus, designate certain student athletes for drug testing. And if those students do not pass the drug test, and you go through the appeals processes, they are banned from competition for 1 calendar year. Wow. So if someone fails a drug test on September 1st of 2004, they're not eligible until September 2nd, 2005. So while there is no drug testing policy, it is penal, there are criminal sanctions in nature when it comes to that. So what we have done at IPFW is institute a full-blown drug testing program that is remedial in nature. We random drug test about half of our student athletes over the course of a year. If we find positive tests, there is a process in place that gets them back to being a full-fledged member of the athletic department. But they have to go through a process to get that done. Well, last fall I got that 12-hour notice from the NCAA, and they said, we'll be there at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, and we expect these student athletes to be lined up and ready to go for a drug test. I am again proud to tell you that all 12 of those student athletes passed, no exceptions noted. So when you think about running sports and you think about handling all the other things, you get these little throw-ins that kind of mess up your day. And there isn't a way you just say, well, can we do it next week? Or, can I take a pass on it? I really do need to have an interview with Mike Moss. I mean, things like that just pop in. And you adjust your schedule and you pick it up and run with it. So those both occurred in the fall of 2004. It was a good test of our department. It was a good test of our reactions and our abilities to cope with issues, and we passed through it just great. So that got the year off to a quick start.
We're going to put sports on the back burner for a quick second. I want to take this one step further. Two different areas. Number one, we talk about the drug testing, and we had a show on here in Mastodon Spotlight a little over a year ago where we had a blue ribbon panel involved, and it was great to find that information out of how they're attacking the problem. Major League Baseball especially has come under fire with steroids, and you know, I have another little gig now that I get to have fun broadcasting Fort Wayne
really? I
Wizards
hadn't
baseball.
noticed. Oh, really? Is that right?
And one of the things that have come up at the start of the minor league season, 38 players were suspended, anywhere from 15 to 60 games for steroid use. Talking about the drug testing policy here at IPFW, with the steroid usage in professional athletes, how does that trickle down to the collegiate athlete? Now, granted, we've been very fortunate so far here on campus, but how are you and your staff tackling that ongoing problem?
Well, you know, Mike, it's interesting. I think that everything that is happening at both the major and minor league baseball levels is helping us. The congressional hearings are helping us. The testifying by the NFL and soon to be the NBA and the NHL is all helping us because it's making our student athletes aware of the fact that this isn't an option anymore. If you're using drugs, whether they're masked or not, whether they're steroidal or not, eventually that's going to come back to haunt you in one way or another. You look at the end game. Why are steroids being so criticized so heavily? Well, it's the long-term effect of what a steroidal inducement does to the human body. So that's telling our student athletes that even if you slide by, even if you don't get caught, you're doing something long-term to your body that you can't do and expect to function when you're as old as you and I are, and that's pretty darn old. So I see that all as a help. Our drug testing policy on campus, as I mentioned, is remedial in nature. It is not, there's not a penalty involved. It's a way to get the student athlete back to where we want them to be, drug-free. And you have counseling sessions. You are subject to secondary exams. You're taught what the effect of these drugs is doing upon you. And we have a 3 strikes and you're out policy. Tested first time, certain counseling procedures come into place. Second time, same type of a process, although a little bit more stringent. Third time, what we say, and I think the policy says it very well, you've made a decision as a student athlete that you don't really want to be a part of IPFW athletics if you've been tested 3 times positive. And so there just really isn't a place for you here. And I think that's the kind of a thing that you're going to see the administrative bodies at the national level going to. That they are going to say, well, we've obviously made a determination that you recognize you don't want to be a part of Major League Baseball if you're going to continue to resort to steroids. And that's a fine decision, but just understand that that's the end of the road. I would like to think that, first of all, our student athletes realize that. They realize that they're doing harm to their body. Secondly, I know Dan Fox and Scotty and Rich Riles and Megan pound this into their heads, that there are alternatives to getting you well or getting you bigger and stronger and faster, and let's explore those. And so they get this from several different angles. So I welcome any kind of a national debate that brings this to the forefront because it reinforces what we're trying to say.
Let's go back to sports now for a minute.
Perfect.
The highlight of the fall season, well, there are many highlights. Soccer Showcase, obviously. Kelly Hartley Hutton. We had her on, and she was going to hit you up for a race.
She got it.
She went 24-10, second national independent championship in 3 years. She's a gem.
Yeah, you look at the way all 4 of the fall sports blend in together. Certainly what Mike Frucci is doing at the cross-country level is unbelievable. Mike operates on a shoestring budget, and Mike has another full-time gig with the city, yet he spends his time and effort after hours, after working all day with the city, to come in here and train his student athletes on the cross-country side. And both teams are just excelling. It's fun to see this. Academically, they're at the top, and they always compete for the top team each year. So Mike is just one of those guys that when you think about, gosh, I've got it tough, or I've got a hard life, or things aren't going my way. You think about a Mike Frucci and all he accomplishes in a 24-hour period of time, and it's just amazing. Terry, as we've talked about with the showcase and with building his soccer teams up, they're competing against the MACs and the Horizon Leagues on a week-to-week basis, and straight up against them. I mean, that's wonderful stuff. But certainly, I think the program that has generated the most interest as far as wins and losses is Kelly's. Kelly's able to compete to a point now that schools are ducking her phone calls. And I'm not talking about schools like, that are our fellow independents. I'm talking about MAC schools. I've got a fairly strongly worded letter to Rick Christ at the MAC saying, Rick, we agreed a few years ago that you'd take our men's tennis team as an affiliate member, and in return you'd give us some scheduling arrangements with women's volleyball. How come all of these women's volleyball coaches don't want to play us anymore? It's because Kelly's beating them, and she's beating them convincingly. And those coaches don't want to show up either here or have us on their campus and be shown up by IPFW. But I think what that also goes to show is that it can be done. People say, well, geez, you've just started as a Division I, you're young in your process, you're not affiliated with a conference. It can't occur, and Kelly is living proof of the fact that yes, it can. And more to your point, should Kelly be rewarded for that? You bet. She graduates her student athletes. They engage in all types of outside community activities. They get good grades, and they win games. I think that's pretty much the prototype for what I want to see all coaches do.
Let's move into the winter season and the two major sports, men's and women's basketball. Let's start with the women first. Mm-hmm. Tough year for Bruce Patterson and his staff. Schedule was loaded up with some mighty big powers, some national teams that did some damage, and the psyche, I think, was hurt, and the team tried to rally later on in the season, but it was a tough go-around.
Well, I think you've summarized Bruce's schedule and season very well. I said to Bruce a few times, you don't need to play these teams. Why are you doing it? And I think what Bruce would be the first to tell you is that he thought he found what was eventually seen as fool's gold. Bruce played a couple of teams, the Kentuckys, the Louisvilles, 2 years ago, and played them very well, and thought we can get to that next level. Well, Bruce can, but not as quickly as Bruce tried to. So when you go up against the Purdues and the Illinois of the world, who have a storied tradition in women's basketball, it's going to be a struggle, and it's going to be a difficult struggle. Xavier is another example. If you saw the Xavier game, when we played Xavier, the difference in physical presentation by the Xavier women against ours was day and night. And I think as talented as you can be, as quick as you can be, you're not going to battle that type of a student athlete on a consistent basis and win. So I've asked Bruce to take a solid look at his schedule and determine that maybe we have more regional teams that would interest more people and yet be not quite as advanced as the ones we played last year. But yeah, it was disappointing, and Bruce knows I'm disappointed in the situation, and I know he and Chris are working very hard to find a way to fix that. Because women's basketball is gaining in stature. We'd like to put it on a showcase status along with what we've done with soccer, and that is bring in a couple of high-name teams and take them over to the Coliseum and play a two-game doubleheader and attract the kind of a crowd that we think Fort Wayne can bring to us, that maybe we begin to host a first and second round women's NCAA tournament here at the Coliseum. But we can't do that unless we are able to show the NCAA that we can fill a place like the Coliseum. And we can't do that unless we can compete with those kinds of teams ourselves. So yeah, Bruce has a lot of work to do in order to be ready to go for the next year, and I know he's working hard to get that done.
Men's basketball. You made one of the most difficult decisions I think you've had to make since you've been the athletic director here. And you removed the head coach mid-season. Mm-hmm. We can take a brief look back in some respects. Looking back now after some time has passed, how difficult was it to make that move when you made it?
Well, it's funny. I was looking at some old notes that I had and some letters that I had written. over the past year, and of course focusing on the January timeframe in particular, that was not a fun month. I now know what the term gut-wrenching means because my insides were literally torn apart. Doug Knoll did everything that Doug knew how to make this a successful program. Doug Knoll is a good man, and he worked hard to make this team a success. Doug and I were probably the closest of friends up in the department. I spent any day that he was in town, I spent some time with him because it's such a high premier and high profile sport in the college ranks. Doug and Carla have been out with Julie and me on many different occasions. Heck, Doug and I won the Cherry Hill Autumn Ridge Golf Invitational last year, and so for those of you who play golf, you understand what a value that is. So he's a good friend, and I hope he remains a good friend. But I felt at the time that it was in the best interest of our department and the best interest of men's basketball that we make the change when we did. I don't want to revisit all the reasons for that because, quite frankly, there's no value in doing that. I took the heat. I made the decision, and I think at the end of the day, it was probably best for everyone. I think it was best for the student athletes. I think it was best for the department. I think it was best for Doug because I think Doug needed a change of scenery. And from what I've been able to understand about where Doug is right now here in the community, he's doing great and loving it. So maybe at the end, it was best for everyone.
You then made a little bit of history. After the men's basketball season was completed, you hired the youngest coach in NCAA Division I by 5 years, Dane Fife, who played high school ball up in Michigan, played for his father, Dan, who was a super guy, and played for Bob Knight and Mike Davis at IU. 25 years of age. You think he's ready to coach D1 basketball?
Well, the answer to that was answered a long time ago before I ever hired him, and that's yes. Dane is an interesting individual. I spent a lot of time with him before we ever made the announcement that he was going to be our head coach. And the sole test of that time, the sole thing I wanted to satisfy in my own mind was, am I doing him a disservice by putting this kind of responsibility on him at his age? Because you can wreck a guy's career real quickly by doing something like that. Irrespective of whether IPFW men's basketball succeeds or fails this year, next year, or the year after, what you don't ever want to do is destroy a young man's career by giving him too much responsibility in too short of a time. So the word maturity was a signal issue for me as we went through the interview process. There was no doubt that many people wanted Dane as our head coach. I've got 100,000 emails from individuals who I'll never know saying, you know, Fife's the best man, he's the best guy for the job, and I understand that the community is very interested in that kind of a situation, but I didn't want to put him in a situation that was untenable for him this early on in his career. What I was able to satisfy myself with about Dane is that his maturity level is way beyond 25 years. I've told people before, if Dane's 25 years old, I'm 90. His work ethic, his dedication to what he wants to do, all of those kinds of things told me that this is the right guy at the right moment for us. Let me give you two quick examples. Dane got his staff together very quickly. And that was because in the material that he sent to me to apply for this job, he had a staff picked out. He already knew who he wanted to have as a part of this program. That goes along with everything else that Dane had done to prepare himself for this. Here was his academic plan, here was his recruiting plan, here was his fundraising plan, here was his physical conditioning plan for his team, and another part of that, of course, were his assistant coaches. Well, two of Dane's assistants are married, and the other one is engaged, and of course Dane's engaged. And you know, we're talking about 25, 30-year-old young men. They've got young family responsibilities and all that. What Dane said to his staff was, leave them where they are. We're going to get one apartment. We're going to live together. We're going to work together. We're going to room together. I guess one of the assistants has already been written up for a serious reprimand because he had the thermostat too warm in the apartment one evening, and Coach gave him a formal letter of reprimand that he cannot touch the thermostat. And I pride myself on coming into this office at weird times. I'll get in here some mornings at 6 a.m. and I'll stay till 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Part of that's just to see who's around. And I was pretty proud of myself that I would, a lot of times, unlock the doors and lock the doors. I've never been able to do that with the men's basketball program. They have outlasted me every single night I've been here. In fact, I stayed in my office one night, and it was 9:30 or 10 o'clock, and I went down and I said, "You guys win. I'm going home." Well, 2 of them were on the phone to recruits. Another one was working on the schedule for 06-07, and Fife's working on a game plan for Notre Dame. So, you know, you just say to yourself, this is the right team at this moment. If they do not succeed, it is not because of lack of preparation. They're spending the quality hours. They're working hard as a unit to get that done. And they realize that you know, there will be eyes on them, mostly because of Dane's reputation at IU, but certainly because of their youth. You know, is it a good situation for us? I think it's the best situation for us. Whether we are able to provide the resources to Coach and his staff that they need to be successful is the real thing that worries me on an hourly basis. Because I think they're driven to succeed. I just can't hold them back.
Talk a little bit about your staff, and talk about the fact that you don't just have, okay, we've got these sports, go make your schedules up. You've got dollars and cents you've got to work. We talk about the drug testing program. We talk about financial responsibility, keeping within a framework of a budget to be able to operate 16 sports, and also attracting more dollars to the university. So you have the floor right now. Talk about.
I guess I deserve a raise.
We'll talk to Chancellor Wartell.
It's a full day. What you try and do is set your priorities as best you can. What I like to do is take a long-term, long-view vision of, you know, where we need to be at certain points of the year, whether it's the academic year or the calendar year or the fiscal year, all of which are different, and then determine from there where I spend the bulk of my particular day. And I think that there's no way that you could ever get this accomplished without a competent and outstanding staff. When you look at Tim Heffron, Tim, I would doubt that half a dozen people who are watching this show really know all the things that Tim does, but he manages our fiscal affairs from top to bottom. That means administering scholarships, it means running the financial affairs of the athletic department, keeping me apprised of where we are with regard to our targets, keeping every coach apprised of where he is to his individual budget. You know, that is a tremendous load off of my mind when you know, when we go to handle all of the other issues. Abby keeping us clean with regard to the compliance side of things. She will alert me to any issue that I need to know about, but she doesn't bother me with the trivial stuff either, and that's great. If Abby can fix it, she doesn't need my intervention. She's smart enough, and I think, talk about youth, there's another, you know, mid-20s who has got a great deal of responsibility and is handling it remarkably well. Kelly, in addition to being an outstandingly successful volleyball coach, is my SWA, Senior Women's Administrator, and handles the administrative side of things. Most athletic departments are divided differently than ours. Most athletic departments have an athletic director who may have 1 or 2 or 3 sports reporting directly to him, and then a bevy of associate athletic directors who have what I will call, and what they would call, the minor sports reporting to them. We don't do it that way. What we do at IPFW is every sport has a financial side and an administrative side. Any financial issue does not come to me unless it first goes through Tim. Any administrative issue does not go to me unless it first goes through Kelly. And they act as tremendous buffers of those issues which we really need to focus on and those that we do not.
We're discussing the state of the IPFW Athletic Department with Athletic Director Mark Pope. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this week's show, so we'll pick things up where we left off next week when we come back with more of Mastodon Spotlight. But until next week, for our sponsor, Ryan Steakhouse, located on North Clinton across from Scott's Foods. This is Mike Maas saying, have a great week and continue to go Dons. Last week on Mastodon Spotlight, we brought in Athletic Director Mark Pope for a end-of-the-season appraisal of IPFW athletics. Unfortunately, we ran out of time before we could complete our conversation, so Mark is back and we're back as well. It really is the final edition of Mastodon Spotlight for 2004-2005. Stay tuned. It's coming your way right here on College 56 Sports.
You know, if she continues to spill product at a rate of 3 per hour, unit cost, say 60 cents. Factor in breakage, downtime, lost sales, you're looking at $2,400 a month. Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne. One university, two great names.
Hi again, everybody. I'm Mike Maas. Welcome to what really is the final edition of Mastodon Spotlight for 2004-2005. We started a program last week with Athletic Director Mark Pope, and we got into such a good discussion that I didn't want it to stop. So what we're going to do is we created a second show. So again, our program brought to you by Ryan Steakhouse, located on North Clinton Street across from Scott's Foods. We're happy to welcome Mark back, so to speak. And let's continue our discussion from last week. We tried to get a year of review in. Can't do it in a half an hour. I found that out. But we did get into some fascinating topics. And we started with the fall season. We worked our way into basketball. We left off last week talking about your staff. Mm-hmm. And because one man cannot run a department, he has to have some help because we have 16 sports here on campus. And you talked about Tim Heffron. You talked about Kelly Hartley. Talk about some of the other members of your staff.
Oh, sure. I mean, you think about the division of responsibilities, and it's kind of occurred a little bit like a Rube Goldberg design. We found a need, and we found someone to fill that need, and they took care of it, and then another need sprouted out of that, and so we attached something onto there. And one of the things I want to do this summer is disassemble that whole thing, take a look at it, and determine if we've got the right people doing the right things. You know, in addition to Tim and Kelly, who handle kind of the administrative and financial side of the house, you know, Abby Reneker is an outstanding young lady in terms of her work with compliance. She keeps us clean and tells me when we don't, both of which are critically important. There isn't a Division I institution, there isn't a collegiate institution in this nation that doesn't make mistakes when it comes to compliance issues. But recognizing them, arresting the problem, fixing the process, those are the things that Abby does very, very well. You know, Rudy and his SID operations, Rudy Jovich, couldn't live without him. And again, Rudy's another example of one of those staff people who's gone beyond what his job description is. Rudy's supposed to report the news. Rudy doesn't do that. I mean, he's the one on the PA at the basketball games and, you know, moving back and forth with the various sports to make sure our best issues are covered. He's a gifted writer. And so you know, Rudy's gone beyond the pale when it comes to that pure job description. Our most recent addition is Kent Horman. Kent has come over from 33 to do our marketing, and sports marketing has become such a much bigger part of IPFW than it ever was before, and it will escalate more and more. Especially with Kent's gifts and expertise. So we're going to see a ramping up in that. Brian Miller handles all of the game day promotions. Ball State has a job called Director of Game Day Experience, and I'd like to make that the title of, for what Brian Miller does, that when a fan or a customer or a student comes into IPFW, whether it's at Gates or at the Coliseum, they enjoy the entire experience from beginning to end. Yeah, whether that includes the pep band, the cheerleaders, game day promotions, just making you feel good about having invested your time at one of our events. That's in Brian's bailiwick. So, and they all do this stuff kind of autonomously. I mean, people don't come running up to me and telling me, well, I'm going to do this today and that today. You know, what I've said to them is, do your job. When you get, when you need an issue resolved, come see me, but don't come see me. Figure it out yourself. And they're fiercely independent in that regard, so it's neat.
Let's go back to sports a little bit now, because we have a lot of other sports to cover. We've gone through the fall season. We got into basketball a little bit, and a lot of the excitement with Dane Fife, now the youngest NCAA Division I coach. A sport that's transitional, starts in the winter, ends in the spring, men's volleyball, with the dean of the staff here, IPFW, Arnie Ball, 25 years. And Arnie will tell you that he wasn't thrilled with the total results of the season, but when you lose your 3-year setter right before the season starts, literally, and Santiago decided to make a change and play professionally in Puerto Rico, and I guess, whatever the reasons are, they were. So Arnie had a tough go, had to try to work in a new setter, and the setter position may be the toughest position in men's volleyball, but they did get to the finals, one match away from qualifying for the Final Four. They just ran into a tough Ohio State team. They knocked off a very good Loyola team at Loyola in the conference tournament.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Arnie would be the first to tell you that this season was overall a disappointment, finishing, however, with a little bit of an uptick at the end with the victory over Loyola. I said to Arnie at the end of the season, what I think would have made a big difference in that Ohio State game if we could have been playing that at Gates rather than at Loyola. Why don't you set as a goal next year that we're going to have that tournament here at Gates? And he said, well, Mark, I don't think you want me to do that, because for the last X number of years, whoever's hosted the tournament has lost. I said, well, fine, we'll go find a nice neutral court then and play it there. But yeah, I think Arnie's continuing to struggle and rebuild under the Division I rules. When in the past Arnie enjoyed more success with Division II type players. That situation is gone, and it's not coming back. He is going to have to compete with the Penn States, the Ball States, the Ohio States for the quality student athlete who plays men's volleyball, and he knows that. Arnie's excited about what's coming along down the road next year. I guess every football fan's thrilled in August about how their team's going to be too, until the first game. But I think Arnie has got the chance to have a season with a lot of young men who are returning, coupled with some outstanding recruits that we have coming in, that this could be a breakout year for them. What Arnie needs to do, I think, is spend a lot of time with that younger team, and he'll have the chance to do that. To develop them into a real first-class organization. But I think he can make that happen this next year.
Now let's get into the spring sports. And I want to save baseball for last, because Billy had a phenomenal year. Jeff Marsh establishing 2 golf programs, and interesting, on the women's side, he only had 5 players, so they all played in every tournament. He had a little bit more depth on the men's side, but he is building up 2 very good programs.
Well, let's not discount in the winter sports as we move into spring women's indoor track.
That's true.
Again, Mike Frucci coming through, performing well. Every time you saw Ashley Ritchie run, it was for a new school record. What a phenomenal athlete she is. But yeah, as you transition into the spring, of course, women's track goes from indoor to outdoor. Mike continues to work his magic to have IPFW represented across the nation on track. Eric Burns kicks into full gear with tennis, and I know Eric was disappointed at his team's performances this year, but he's also looking at a pretty solid recruiting year for tennis, so that should be encouraging. And then Jeff picking up golf, and we've got to remember golf's 1 year old. And you just don't start a program like that and expect immediate results. I was reading that Detroit Mercy is starting women's golf They announced it last year to start next year, so they took a full year of not participating just to start the program. We didn't do that. We just jumped right into it, and Jeff has done a fine job. And you've got to remember that Jeff transitioned also. He was a teaching professional at Deer Track and has now moved into a full-time golf coach. And so Jeff's learning also. But it's fun because you'll see Jeff's office used to be right next to mine until we changed some offices around this past week. He'd come bolting into my office with every new recruit, every new signing, every new advice, and he'd say, "Yeah, it's great, Jeff. It's great, Jeff. I really got some things I need to do here." But but you love to share in that enthusiasm. So so Jeff, yeah, I'm very proud of what he's done, and I think he'll be a great coach as we move down the road.
Keith Fisher had a tough year with the softball team. I know he's always optimistic, and I know they got the season off to a great start in terms of where they started the season in Hawaii, and played some good competition. They only won 1 out of the 5 games, but they were competitive in 3 out of the 5.
Yeah, I think Keith expected this team to come together a little more quickly than it did. Hawaii was an interesting experience, and I sacrificed and went over with them. I can't say that with a straight face either. You know, playing the Oregons and the Washingtons of the world, 2 teams that made it to the tournament, we're outclassed. I mean, we just can't compete against the Pac-10 level of softball. I dare say there aren't many Midwest teams that can compete against a Pac-10 level because they have such a longer playing season. But you know, competing against Hawaii and the 2 games against Jacksonville, I think the team did very well, and I expected to see that as a springboard moving forward, especially through the Rebel games in Orlando, and then move into the spring season. And it just never caught fire. And as I do with every coach, I have a season-ending review of their performance, and I set certain goals for them, and we get an agreement on those goals. And I think what I told Keith was this was not the year I expected. We're spending too many resources on softball for the rate of return that we're getting, and we expect to see it moved up, especially because Fort Wayne is such a solid softball community. And Keith knows that, and Keith understands that. And I think you'll see a vastly improved team coming next spring.
Well, now let's jump to baseball. And as we're taping this, last night I had the opportunity to have Billy Gernon on during the Wizards broadcast, as you invited a good contingent of the athletic department staff to come watch the Wizards play. And Billy was kind enough to come over, and we had a great time for about 3 innings. 24-25, his best record yet as a Division I coach. He defeated 3 teams that have qualified for postseason play in the NCAA tournament. There were some statistical leaders in terms of like Ryan Keena getting hit by pitch, stolen bases, hitting, and a few others. And one of the things, and knowing Billy as I've gotten to know him over the last 5 years, what a competitor he is. And one of the things he talked about me between innings off air was our last game was rained out. We were behind 4-2, but we were coming on, and he wanted the chance to get that win to have a 500 season. He really did a great job.
Yeah, I had asked Billy, and this is where these performance reviews at the end of a season are so critical. I've now met with everyone. No, I think I'm done. I may have one more person, I can't recall. But that's why I was talking to you last night, Mike, and I said, you know, I'm living half my life in the past with performance reviews and half my life in the future doing planning for the next year. I don't live in the present. I just, you know, move from past to future. But in talking to Billy a year ago, I said I expect to see significant improvement in 3 things: wins and losses, academic performance, and community support and community involvement. And as I sat down to review Billy's year, he succeeded in all 3 of those. And that to me is what, you know, a coach who sets out a game plan and accomplishes it is all about. Now his goals next year just went up again because he was able to achieve these, but he's got more responsibilities to go. I would venture to say that if you asked Billy straightforward if he thought the year was a success, he would say no, because it was 24-25 and he expected at least 25-24. And that's the kind of a coach I want on my department, one who is not satisfied with people saying you did a successful job or you had a remarkable season when it was not a winning season. That's the kind of a person that we need to foster and develop at IPFW, because winning is important. As President Jischke once said to me, if winning's not important, why do we invest so much in scoreboards? That's a good point. So, so I would say that Billy, while having a good year and a credible year and an improving year, I think wants to do better than he is right now. And that's where I see baseball, because baseball is also a significant investment for us. You're talking 25, 30 guys on a team. It disrupts issues on gender equity. It disrupts issues on resources with travel and things like that. Baseball must be good. And so we're going to work on that to make sure that he continues in that way.
I think we've got all the sports covered. I'm trying to rack my brain, what small brain it is. Academics, something that's been near and dear to your heart ever since you came here.
Mm-hmm.
You've always had a goal, 3-point cumulative GPA for student athletes. What was it for this year?
3.0. I just got it verified by Elliot Blumenthal, our faculty athletic rep. Elliot double checks all the grades, works with Jack Dahl to make sure the numbers are correct, and yes, we hit a 3.0 again for the entire 04-05 academic year. Why is that important? Well, it's really important for a couple of reasons. One, I can boast about it. It's a bellwether, it's a mark that you can test yourself against other institutions, because let's face it, other athletic departments have a GPA. It's interesting, look on their website and see how many tout it. The ones that are successful do, the ones that aren't, you'll never hear about it. And I want to be able to tout our GPA. The reason it's important to me is I believe that IPFW stands in a particularly important part of Fort Wayne, Indiana. We are going to supply the workforce for the future. Those people who are going to be paying my Social Security checks are in these classrooms today. They're going to stay in Fort Wayne because 80% of IPFW grads remain in Northeast Indiana area. The NCAA has very stringent and strong requirements when it comes to completion of degree, progress toward degree. As a sophomore, you have to have so much of your major done. As a junior, you have to have so much. Senior, you have to have so much. That's going to continue, and in fact, it's probably going to be stressed more and more by the NCAA. If I've got a student athlete who has to complete progress toward degree and has a 3.0 or better, has good grades, when he gets to the end of his senior year, when he's done with competition, he's only got this much schooling left. And he's going to finish it because he's got good grades, he's been successful, he's got Division I experience, he's that close to getting the degree, he or she's going to complete that degree and become a productive workforce, a member of the workforce here in Fort Wayne. And that's what this is all about. I'd love to say it's about winning national championships. I'd love to say it's about taking people in the first round of the Major League Baseball draft or the NBA draft. It's really not at our stage of development. It is about training people to go out and make Fort Wayne a better place than it is right now. And if we were able to provide them with Division I competitive experience, good grades, progress toward degree, get their degrees, and remain in Northeast Indiana, then we've done a pretty good job.
Just look in the future. You say you don't live the present. Look at the past, jump to the future. What is the future for IPFW athletics?
Well, IPFW athletics needs to continue along the path that it has developed at this point. I don't think you're going to see as momentous or disruptive a year in 05-06. I don't want to see that kind of a year. What I would like to see is slow and steady development in what we're doing. I would love more than anything to get this conference affiliation issue behind me. In another month, I will have completed my 4th year here. For the last 2.5 years, I have spent some time every single day working towards that. And I am convinced at this moment that the old adage is very true, that success occurs when preparation meets opportunity. If the success is gaining conference affiliation, then 2 things have to occur. We need to be prepared, and that opportunity needs to strike. Are we prepared? Absolutely. I was talking to a Hammond Times reporter yesterday about the Mid-Con, and I said, I think from the 3 critical aspects, geography, academic quality, and athletic preparation, we are the peer of any group in the Mid-Con right now, and we defy them to challenge us on that. You want to bring a team over and play us in any sport, anytime, we'll be glad to do it. You want to invite us to your place, we'll take you on. I think we are on a par with every team in the Mid-Con right now. Academically, I think we're just as good as any program in there. And geography, with the cluster that we have with Chicago State and Valparaiso and Oakland and IUPUI and Western Michigan, we're a perfect fit from a geographic standpoint. So I think we're prepared. We need that event to occur that'll move things. Would the Big East be changed as dramatically as it is today without the ACC grabbing Miami of Florida? Absolutely not. What would have happened? Do you know that a year ago, a year and a half ago, Conference USA's offices were located in Chicago? Today they're in Dallas, Texas, because Conference USA did a complete paradigm shift after the ACC took programs from the Big East took programs from Conference USA. Conference USA lost its Midwest flavor, the DePauls, the Marquettes of the world, and focused down into Southwest U.S. and set up their, I mean, they literally moved from Chicago to Dallas to more accommodate their customer base. That's when opportunity strikes. Now that situation, the Big East, the ACC, the Conference USA situation, some changes in the Big Sky, some changes out in the Big West Conference, that has not yet come down to what I would call the D1 AAAs, those D1 programs without football, most notably the Horizon League and the Mid-Con. They have remained relatively stable over the last 4 years. Darn it. I don't want them to be stable. I want them to be disruptive, because that's the kind of a change that occurs that takes a DePaul. Can you imagine saying 5 years ago DePaul University is going to be in the Big East?
No.
You know, no one would have fathomed it in their wildest imaginations, and yet it's a reality. And so could anyone imagine St. Louis University being a member of the Atlantic 10? What about St. Louis University screams Atlantic to you? I think it's closer to the Pacific, but I don't know my geography that well. But I mean, those are the kinds of sea changes that are occurring and have occurred in conferences. Absent those kind of changes, I'm not sure that opportunity presents itself. So while all I can do is keep our house in order and make us better than we are right now, so that when that opportunity does strike, we'll be ready to go with it. 4 years ago, had all those changes occurred, I don't think there's any way IPFW Athletics was ready to be a conference member. I really don't. We had too many things that needed to be fixed, too many problems internally and externally in our department that were not ready to take on a full-blown conference affiliation, and I think we would have floundered. And I think you see certain members of institutions in conferences of our size who have joined that have floundered terribly. And so if we were invited 4 years ago, I'm not sure it would have been a good thing for us. I think we're ready now. I think we're more than ready. And when that opportunity strikes, we're going to be there and ready to go.
Has there ever been any thought given, obviously everyone thinks about the Mid-Con and the Horizon League for their geographic location, if nothing else. Any thoughts to any other conferences, i.e. Sun Belt? Now, that may sound strange, also in the Midwest, but any other conferences that you've talked to?
No, I've talked to the Sun Belt. I've talked to the Atlantic Sun. I've talked to the to Conference USA. I've talked to the MAC. I think that's about it. No, you don't leave a stone unturned. So who knows when the next paradigm shift will occur, such as occurred. You know, when I called Conference USA, they were still in Chicago, and with DePaul Marquette, and I was talking about what great synergies there were there. Well, I can't think of his first name. Britton, the commissioner of Conference USA, had already planned out where his program was going, and it didn't involve Midwest teams anymore. So you know, those kind of changes occur. But yes, we won't leave a stone unturned. I will not stop my efforts to get this done. I know how important it is to our student athletes. I know how important it is to our coaches. And I know how important it is to community pride to get this done. And we will get it done. It will happen. I just wish it were yesterday instead of tomorrow.
One question left, Mark. What have the last 4 years been like for you?
You know, it's kind of hard to believe it's been 4 years, but it really has. I can honestly tell you that I'm not getting as much money as I used to get from a salary standpoint, but I don't think I've ever been as pleased with being able to be present at the creation of something like this and see my way through it. Now, I got to add on top of that that never would have occurred without an incredible amount of help. We've talked about the staff and their tremendous efforts. Chancellor Wortell has been undying in his support for our program and in our efforts to succeed. I can honestly tell you I haven't been turned down by him. I may have had my request modified a little bit, but he, you know, if I go in and present a coherent, logical reason for wanting something, we'll find a way to get it done. The faculty and the staff on this community, in this IPFW community, have been incredible. Getting phone calls and letters and emails from professors telling me what a joy it is to have 2 softball players in his class or her class, and also on the other hand telling me we got 2 over here that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, they don't have a game every day, Mark, so the fact that they're absent from class has got me worried. I mean, those are the kinds of things that draw a community together, and we've had that. Dave Danielson in physical plant, all the work he does for us in terms of getting the baseball and softball fields ready and the soccer showcase. I mean, this takes the sum of all the parts to make it successful. And then you throw in, of course, the entire Fort Wayne community. I think as I've gone around and talked to groups and discussed things with various organizations in this community, they understand now what we're trying to do. They understand that we are not Purdue, we are not Indiana. But you know what? We're the community's institution, and the community is going to support it. Because every time you see that ESPN ticker go out, it says IPFW, Indiana Purdue, Fort Wayne, and everybody knows what that's all about. And you can see the community support beginning to develop for us. It's just going to take time to mature. Now, we can do it quicker, and other programs have done it quicker, and they failed at the end. I can think of 4 or 5 programs right off the tip of my tongue that are on NCAA probation because they tried to do it more quickly. And it's not the way this thing works. You've got to take it slowly, progressively, continue to develop your resources, continue to develop your relationships. At the end of the day, I think what we'll have is what I hope to leave this institution with, and that is an athletic department that is winning conference championships. It, first and foremost, is academically sound, is fiscally sound, and contributes back to its community on a regular basis. And when I get to that day, I am so out of here you won't believe it.
Thank you
Yep.
for giving us some time, extra program.
I'm sorry for the poor people that have to endure this, but
Continued success.
Thanks.
And we appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get together a little more often next year and maybe not so far apart.
sounds good to me. Let me know when.
Thank you. We've been chatting with Mark Pope, the Director of Athletics here at IPFW. That is it for this edition of Mastodon Spotlight. And that's it for Mastodon Spotlight for 2004-2005. I briefly want to take time to thank a couple of people. Our sponsor, Ryan Steakhouse, located on North Clinton Street across from Scott's Foods. Bernie Lohmiller, John Yaus, Jeremy Kloppenstein. Without those 3 gentlemen, this show would not have existed for the last 6 years. I wouldn't have been involved with this university for the last 8 years, or for 8 years, I should say. Thanks to those gentlemen, thanks to Mark and his staff for bringing coaches and student athletes on board so that we can tell you what else is going on within the athletic department here at IPFW. We're going to take a few weeks off, recharge the batteries, and then when the new year starts, Soccer Showcase, we'll be back for season number 7, Lord willing, of Mastodon Spotlight. But until then, this is Mike Moss saying, have a great summer, thanks for tuning in, and continue to go Dons.